This will be the last video with reference to like the history of alcohol section this week. And in particular, these conversations and these questions are never going to go away, but I think that they're really important to be exposed to. They're really important to dive in more deeply. And we're going to finish today with an interesting possibility, if that's the right word. Okay. In particular, I've been honing in on this way of, I've been honing in on the argument that, I've been honing in on the argument that that we've maybe been pre-adapted and predisposed evolutionarily to alcohol. So this article, again, kind of asks similar questions, it makes similar reference, but it also kind of takes that next step of, well, what about, or might it be the case that perhaps this disposition for alcohol can yield and can lead to more disastrous outcomes, such as alcoholism, okay? Which is a serious component of our overall class, which is a serious component of our overall conversations here. But again, if it is the case, and we think about this in terms of other kind of medical issues, right? Especially when we think genetics, and we know that alcoholism is genetic, right? That if you have parents that are alcoholics, you are more likely to also become an alcoholic or dependent on alcohol. If your grandparents, parents, right? And you kind of work that lineage back. Well, again, could it be argued, and I'm not making this claim, please do not misconstrue me here, but could it be argued, given what we talked about on Tuesday, what we've talked about today, could it be argued that potentially because of our predisposition, evolutionarily speaking, to and for fermenting fruits, that when one becomes dependent upon it, right, that predisposition is only magnified and only intensified. And so when we see these addictive properties manifest, potentially, in those that do become addicted to alcohol, right, is it this kind of relationship where, right, the alcohol starts to overtake this already, again, maybe hardwiring we have for that effect, that taste of alcohol initially. Okay? I hope that question made sense. I think y'all can see where I'm going here. Again, I'm not claiming that alcoholism is a result of our evolutionary history being predisposed to the proclivities and tastes for alcohol. I'm not making that claim, but I can see how you get there. I'm not making that claim. Okay? I'm merely asking the question, per this article here, starting on page 13, that maybe this is, again, one way of thinking about alcoholism, one way of thinking about issues as it relates to alcohol. All right, so on page 13, this is coming from, again, a section of a book by Robert Dudley called The Introduction to the Drunken Monkey. So again, playing off the drunken ape hypothesis, which I've mentioned this week. Why we drink and abuse alcohol. And I'm going to read these first two paragraphs because I think that they're, again, worthwhile, and they kind of add to what I was just asking. Many of us like to drink alcohol, and some of us like to drink to excess. Why do many people enjoy at most 1 or 2 drinks per day, whereas others routinely get plastered? Excuse me. What motivates some college students to drink to the point of passing out or even death? And why do people regularly drink and drive? We have all witnessed examples of both alcohol use and abuse, and perhaps we have wondered why close relatives and friends, when drunk, can behave in aberrant and destructive ways. Alternatively, creative acts of expression and genuine inspiration can result from a glass of wine or a 6-pack shared among friends. Where do such differing responses to alcohol come from? Okay. Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Especially in that context given. And in a way, we can ask the question, we can reframe it in the nature or nurture, right? Genetically, physiologically, Am I who I am because of my genetics, because of my DNA, because of my, physiology, my biology, my nature? Or am I who I am and how I am because of how I was raised, where I was raised, the opportunities afforded to me, right? Probably a little bit of both, but it still kind of like bears this kind of question, right? That if we were to share a six-pack, the behaviors that result might be very different. Why is that? Okay. Our relationship with the alcohol molecule is clearly mixed. On the one hand, in social context, drinking can be positive and beneficial. Alternatively, it can destroy us, our relatives, friends, and others. And destroy many of us it does, either directly or indirectly. About 1/3 of highway fatalities in the United States, for example, are alcohol associated. The social, psychological, and emotional damages of excessive drinking are more difficult to quantify, but clearly substantial. Nonetheless, supermarkets, bars, restaurants, and drive-through liquor stores, yes, that is a thing, drive-through liquor stores, do a thriving business on the sale of alcohol. What factors underlie our drinking behaviors, both responsible and damaging? Unlike many addictive substances consumed by modern-day humans, alcohol routinely turns up in natural environments. In the process of fermentation, yeasts that feed on fruit sugars actively produce alcohol, apparently in an effort to kill off competing bacteria, yada, yada, yada. Many different kinds of chemical products are generated during this process. Both the predominant one is termed ethanol, right, ethyl alcohol, henceforth simply referred to as alcohol. Not coincidentally, this is the one we prefer. The ecological origin of alcohol molecules is therefore an important piece of the background information The ecological origin of alcohol molecules is therefore an important piece of background information if we are to understand our tendency to drink today. Deciphering the origins of fermentation also places them in a much broader ecological context, encompassing biology of yeasts, microbial competitors such as bacterial, and many different kinds of fruit-producing plants. Okay? I'm going to read just a little bit more and then maybe back off entirely. I'm just reading the book to you. But this, again, helps us set up where we're going to go. In the wild, fruits come in all kinds of colors, shapes, sizes, and flavors. And around the world today, there are hundreds of thousands of species of flowering plants, many of which surround their seeds with sweet, nutritious pulp. But what makes a fruit ripe and ready to eat? And how do we recognize what constitutes an overripe fruit? When might we eat a rotten fruit? At the produce section in the supermarket, we choose fruits on the basis of multiple sensory clues, having their texture, color, and odor. But these products of agricultural domestication differ dramatically from natural genetic predecessors in the real world. Humans have, via artificial selection over many centuries, created fruits that are typically larger, more sugary, and also more rot-resistant than their wild counterparts. Inferences from our own personal experience in the supermarket, therefore, can be misleading with respect to the natural ecology of ripeness and fruits to mature. Okay? So as we, get familiar with, again, this kind of like drunken ape theory, and we talk about like fermenting fruits, this does a nice job of, again, kind of signaling us to the fact that like when we go to the grocery store and we see this fruit on the shelf, right? Oranges, bananas, raspberries, blueberries, any kind of fruit, right? We've been able to manipulate those fruits, right? And usually we've been able to manipulate them so they have a longer shelf life because, again, longer shelf life means more likely that they get sold, which means more money in the producer, yada, yada, yada. But if we were to actually go hiking through the rainforest, if we were actually to find, natural fruit growing just out in the world, which even out here in Idaho in the summer, in the late summer, you can find blackberry bushes, you can find, not cranberries, you can find cherries, you can find... cherries are kind of early summer, midsummer, but blackberries late summer, some blueberries, huckleberries are often sought out, right? But those are not going to last as long as what you find in the supermarket. So again, when I'm talking about fermenting fruit, we have to, again, kind of like temper that to recognize the fact that like this fruit goes a lot quicker than what we see in the grocery store. Okay? Yada, yada, yada. Moving on. On page 15, it says, it talks about like actual drunkenness in animals, okay, which is kind of funny, like actually seeing a drunk animal from eating too much fermented fruit. It's been documented a little bit, but not overly. It's been documented, but not overly documented to really recognize. Yada, yada, yada. I'm skipping ahead here. I'm just going to move kind of quick because I know you've had a lot of video and a lot of me droning on. So I want to get to just the main takeaway here, which I already kind of said at the start. I'm just going to move to this last paragraph on 16. Okay? Although the great apes, including chimpanzees, are the primates today most closely related to modern humans, the divergence between the two evolutionary lineages actually began close to 8 million years ago. The diets of early humans' ancestors diversified over the following millions of years and began to include a much broader range of plant tissue and greater amounts of animal fats and protein, including rude fashion one another, some cannibalism. The ability to cook both and meat may also have played an important role in dietary outcomes, although the timing of this is probably is highly disputed. Unambiguously, though, the dinner menu changed dramatically about 12,000 years ago with the origins of agriculture. Cultural evolution in humans then began to exert the predominant influence on what we eat. Nevertheless, as with meat consumption, preference for salt, and a variety of other dietary habits, yada, 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 eating choices today can be strongly influenced by genetic predisposition. Genetic predisposition. Nowhere is this effect more evident than in so-called diseases of nutritional excess. These are adverse medical outcomes deriving from the mismatch between biological environments in which we evolve and the ones that we've created to live via technology. Alcoholism may be one such disease, and that's detailed in a later part of the book, which I don't actually have in handling the hard stuff, but probably should. The main takeaway here, okay? And again, I apologize for some of the long-windedness in these videos. But the main takeaway here, when we think about the history of alcohol, when we think about our own history with alcohol, if it is plausible that we do have this, predisposition for the taste of ethanol, for the taste of ethyl alcohol, then who's to say, potentially, right, that doesn't have some sort of connection with those that suffer from alcoholism as a disease, right? And we'll explore alcoholism again later in the semester, and again, the seriousness with it. But I hope that as you kind of reflect on this week in particular, I think my main takeaway here is just like the scope, like how just like grand the scope of alcohol is in the history and with the history of humanity, right? That alcohol predates humanity, and then the development of it throughout the world over the last 10,000 years is wild. Fairly unfathomable at times as well. But I hope that just kind of like having at least a little bit of an appreciation, a little bit of an awareness of kind of the this dramatic history gives us a better appreciation for the next time that we take a sip, right? Recognizing that when I have a beer, someone 8,000 years ago, well, I don't know if it was 8,000, but someone many thousand years ago was also tasting the same thing. It's kind of wild. Have a good weekend, everybody. Drink a beer if you're old enough and cheer on the Kansas City football team to victory.